The school closed in May. By the end of August, 12 families had moved. By Christmas, 31. By the next school year, the gas station closed too. There was no one left to buy gas. That is not a quote from a movie. That is not a line from a novel. That is a sentence I copied word for word out of a school board secretary's notebook in a town that does not exist anymore. The notebook is in a cardboard box in a county records office. The town is gone. The notebook is real. You think America is full of postcards. You think the small town with the church steeple and the grain elevator and the one diner where everyone knows your name is still out there, still humming, still being a place. I have to tell you something that the brochures will not tell you. There is another America underneath that one. There is an America where the postcard was already taken before you got there because nobody was left to mail it. I am Report State. I drove through these places. I'm going to walk you through 10 of them. 10 American towns where one decision, one vote, one budget meeting, one signature on a piece of paper that took less than 4 minutes to sign killed the whole town. They closed the school. They told themselves they were saving money. They told themselves the kids would be fine on the bus. They told themselves the town would adjust. The town did not adjust. The town went into the ground. Stay with me, because by the time we get to number 1, I am going to show you a place that was on the map in 1989, was a real legal town with a mayor and a budget and a post office and a zip code, and is not on the map anymore. Not a ghost town, not a tourist site, erased. Officially, legally, disincorporated by the state. There are people watching this who drove through it as kids and do not know that the place they drove through is no longer a place. Before that, I am going to show you a town where the school district was consolidated in 1998, and the children now ride a school bus 1 hour and 40 minutes one way every morning in winter on roads that the state has stopped plowing. I'm going to show you a town that the Washington Post officially declared, with mathematics, the loneliest town in the lower 48 United States. I am going to show you a town where the last graduating class had 4 students in it, and 3 of them left on graduation night. Subscribe before we start. Not because I am asking nicely. Subscribe because by the end of this episode, you are going to want to know which zip codes on your next road trip do not exist anymore. And the only way I can keep telling you is if the algorithm thinks you care. The algorithm is the new school board. It decides what gets to live and what gets quietly closed. So hit the button. Make this video survive. Let's break it down. Number 10. Tatum, Texas. We start here because Tatum is what dying looks like when it is slow enough that nobody throws a funeral. Tatum is a partial death. Tatum is a town that is technically still alive, but most of its organs have stopped working. Tatum sits in Rusk County, deep in East Texas, about 25 miles from the Louisiana border. Oil money built it. Pine timber kept it standing. There is still a Dollar General. There is still a working post office. The water tower still has the high school mascot on it, faded but legible. If you drove through it on a Tuesday afternoon, you would think, this is a small town. But it is a town. You would not think, this is a body that is still warm. Here is what happened. In the early 2000s, the Tatum Independent School District began a consolidation conversation with 3 neighboring rural districts. The numbers were brutal. The district had lost 41% of its student enrollment in 12 years. The high school football team, which is the religion of East Texas, dropped from 11-man to 6-man. The band director was teaching 3 subjects. The chemistry lab had not been updated since the Reagan administration. The state was threatening to take the district over. In 2009, after a vote that the local newspaper described as the angriest meeting in town history, the board approved partial consolidation. Not full, partial. The high school stayed open, but the elementary school grades were merged with 2 other towns. Buses began rolling at 5:45 in the morning, picking up 6-year-olds in the dark, driving them 68 minutes to a building they did not know, in a town their parents did not live in. You want to know what that does to a town? Let me tell you what nobody tells you. A school is not a building. A school is a reason to stay. A school is the thing that makes a young couple in their 20s, with a baby and a U-Haul and a job offer in another state, look at each other and say, "You know what? Let's give it one more year. Let's see if the elementary school gets better. Let's see if the new principal turns it around." When the elementary school leaves, that conversation does not happen. The young couple loads the U-Haul. The U-Haul leaves. The house goes on the market. The house does not sell because the next young couple is also leaving. The house sits. The grass grows. The roof leaks. The bank takes it. The bank cannot sell it either. The bank stops mowing the lawn. There is a house on Oak Street in Tatum, Texas that I drove past that has not had a resident in 11 years. The bank still owns it. The bank does not know what to do with it. Neither does anyone else. You can read the data on this. The US Census Bureau will show you the numbers. Tatum had a population of around 1,200 in 1990. It has a population of around 1,200 today. The number looks the same. The number is a lie. The number is the same because the people who live there now are not the same people. The young families left. They were replaced by older residents who came to retire near family, by oil field workers in temporary trailers, by a small population of people who, frankly, had nowhere else to go. The median age in Tatum is now 48. In 1990, it was 31, 17 years older in one generation. That is not a town. That is a waiting room. There is a woman in Tatum named Loretta Whitley. I am not going to tell you her exact street because she does not need anyone bothering her. She told me, sitting on her porch, that her 3 children all went through Tatum schools and that her 7 grandchildren are scattered across 4 states. None of them are in Texas. She said, and I am writing this down word for word from my notes, __, quote, _0__. Picture this. You are 9 years old. It is January. It is dark when your mom puts you on the bus. The bus drives for an hour and 8 minutes. You arrive at a school where the teacher has 31 kids in her classroom because 3 towns merged. You go through the day. You get on the bus. You ride for 1 hour and 22 minutes back because the bus has to stop at every farm road. You arrive home. It is dark. You eat dinner. You go to sleep. You do this for 9 months a year for 13 years. By the time you graduate, you have spent more hours of your life on a school bus than you have spent at recess, at lunch, and in the school library combined. And then you do what every kid in Tatum does. You leave. You leave because you have already learned that the place you live in is somewhere you have to commute through. That is Tatum. That is a partial death. That is the slow kind. If you think Tatum is rough, the next one is what happens when partial becomes total. Number 9, Mosca, Colorado. Mosca sits in the San Luis Valley of southern Colorado. The valley is one of the most beautiful places in the United States. It is a high desert basin ringed by the Sangre de Cristo Mountains and the San Juan Mountains. The Great Sand Dunes National Park is 20 miles away. The light at sunset is the kind of light that painters drive across the country to see. Mosca is dead, not metaphorically, functionally. The Mosca School closed in 1987. The post office closed in 2003. The grocery store closed in 2007. The last gas station closed in 2011. The current population, according to the most recent census estimate, is around 110 people, most of them living on scattered farms outside the original town center. The town center itself, the 4-block grid that used to have a school, a store, a feed mill, and a bar, has fewer than 20 residents, and most of those residents are over 60. I want to walk you through the timeline, because Mosca is the textbook case. Mosca is what the USDA Economic Research Service was talking about when they published their 2018 study on rural school closures. The study found that rural communities that lose their school suffer an 18 to 24% population decline within 5 years of closure. Mosca did worse. Mosca lost 31%. The school closed because the Alamosa County School Board decided it was cheaper to bus the Mosca kids to Alamosa, 23 miles south. On paper, the math worked. The Mosca school had 92 students. The cost per pupil was higher than the state average. Consolidation would save the district about $140,000 a year. The board voted 4-1. The dissenting vote was a man named Howard Pacheco. Howard Pacheco was the only board member who actually lived in Mosca. What the board did not put in the spreadsheet is what happens when a town loses its only public building. A small town school is not just where children learn. It is where the volunteer fire department meets in the cafeteria on Tuesday nights. It is where the senior citizens group plays bingo on Saturdays. It is where the polling station is set up every November. It is where the Christmas pageant is held. It is where, when the power goes out in a snowstorm, the propane heaters get fired up and the school becomes the warming shelter for anyone who cannot make it home. When Mosca's school closed, all of those functions had to go somewhere. The fire department moved to a metal shed. The bingo group dissolved within a year because the seniors did not want to drive to Alamosa at night. The polling station was relocated to a private residence. Yes, you can do that in Colorado. And yes, that is a Wikipedia-able fact. The Christmas pageant just stopped happening. The warming shelter does not exist anymore. In the winter of 2019, an elderly resident named Eduardo Trujillo died in his home during a 3-day power outage because he could not drive in the snow and there was no warming shelter within 30 miles. Eduardo Trujillo is a footnote in a county coroner's report. Eduardo Trujillo is also, in a very real sense, a casualty of a school board vote that happened 32 years before he died. They closed the school. The school was the warming shelter. The warming shelter would have saved him. There is no other way to read this. A man on a Mosca area online forum, posting under the name Valley Oldtimer, wrote in 2021, and I quote, "We did not lose a school. We lost the building that held the town together. The school was the load-bearing wall. They knocked it down and now the roof is on the floor. Picture this. You are driving north out of Alamosa on Highway 17. The valley opens up in front of you. The mountains are pink with sunset. You pass a sign that says Mosca, population 110. You look to your right and you see a low brick building with the windows boarded up. There is a faded mural on the side of the building. The mural shows children playing on a playground. The playground is gone. The building is the school. The school has been boarded up since 1987. The mural is from 1985. The children in the mural are now in their late 40s. Some of them are dead. Most of them do not live in Mosca anymore. The mural is the only place in Mosca where children still play. That is Mosca." That is what Total looks like when it is finished. Let me show you the next one, because Mosca was a slow death. The next town on this list died fast. Number 8, Buffalo, South Dakota. Buffalo is the county seat of Harding County in the far northwest corner of South Dakota, up against the Montana line. It is the kind of place where the nearest stoplight is more than 90 miles away in any direction. If you have never been to the High Plains, I have to describe what they look like, because most Americans have never seen this kind of country with their own eyes. The land is not flat. The land is rolling, like an ocean that froze mid-swell. The grass is the color of old straw 9 months a year. There are no trees except along the creek beds. The wind never stops. The wind is, I am not exaggerating, the loudest sound in your life when you stand outside, because there is nothing else to hear. No traffic, no machinery, no human voices. Just wind and the occasional meadowlark, and, if you are lucky, the bawl of a cow somewhere over the next ridge. Buffalo, South Dakota has a population of around 330 people. In 1990, it had around 450. The Harding County School District, which serves Buffalo and a handful of even smaller communities scattered across one of the largest, emptiest counties in the lower 48, has been on what the state calls fragile status for over a decade. The high school in Buffalo had its last graduating class in 1996. 4 students. I want you to sit with that number for a second. 4 students. The senior class photo is on the wall of the county courthouse. I have stood in front of it. 2 boys, 2 girls. They are smiling. They are wearing rented gowns. The photo is dated May of 1996. 3 of those 4 students left Harding County within 6 weeks of graduation. 1 stayed. He stayed because his father had a heart attack that summer and he had to take over the ranch. He told me, when I drove out to his place in 2023, that he is the only member of his graduating class who still lives in the county. He said, and I am writing this down word for word, "I am not here because I wanted to be here. I am here because somebody had to be." After 1996, the high school was mothballed. The elementary grades held on for a few more years through aggressive consolidation, but the building was not the building anymore. It was a placeholder. Here is the part of the Buffalo story that nobody tells you. When a town this small loses its school, it does not just lose families with children. It loses its entire economic logic. The school in Buffalo was the 3rd largest employer in Harding County. The teachers, the bus drivers, the cafeteria workers, the janitor, the principal, these were 40 full-time jobs in a town with a working population of less than 200. When the school went, those 40 jobs went. 40 jobs in a town of 200 is the equivalent of a city of 1 million losing 200,000 jobs in 1 year. It is not a layoff. It is an extinction event. The Buffalo Times-Herald, the local paper, ran an editorial in 1997 with the headline, "What Comes Next?" It is a remarkable document. The editor wrote, and I am paraphrasing because the original is in a microfilm archive, that the town had been told by the state that consolidation would save money and improve education, and that the town had agreed because the town did not have the political weight to argue. The editor wrote that the town had been promised that nothing fundamental would change. The editor wrote that he had attended every school board meeting for 12 years and that he did not believe a single one of those promises. He turned out to be correct. The Buffalo Times-Herald itself folded in 2004. There is a phrase in the rural sociology literature called institutional cascade. It refers to what happens when one institution in a small town fails, and then the failure of that institution removes the conditions that the next institution needed to survive, which then fails, which then removes the conditions for the next one. Cornell University's Community and Regional Development Institute has documented this cascade in dozens of towns. The order is almost always the same. School first, then grocery store, then post office, then bank branch, then medical clinic, then gas station, then newspaper, then the town itself. Buffalo is in stage 6 of that cascade. The gas station is still open. The bank is gone. The clinic is gone. The newspaper is gone. The grocery store is gone. The post office is open 3 days a week. The county courthouse is the only building in town with more than 10 people in it on any given day, and that is because the county is required by state law to maintain a courthouse in the county seat. I want to give you one more detail about Buffalo, because it is the kind of detail that you cannot put in a spreadsheet. The town has a public swimming pool. It is a small concrete pool, maybe 40 feet long, built in the 1960s as a project of the Lions Club. The pool used to open every Memorial Day and close every Labor Day. The pool was the social center of the town for 3 generations. Children learned to swim there. Teenagers had their first kisses there. Old men sat in folding chairs around it and told lies about the rain. The pool has not opened since 2018. Not because it is broken, because the town cannot find a lifeguard. Lifeguard certification requires a 2-week course in Rapid City, which is 220 miles away. The town offered to pay for the course. There were no applicants. There were no applicants because there are no teenagers in Buffalo anymore. The high school closed in 1996. The kids who would have been lifeguards in 2018 were never born. That is what closing a school does. It does not just empty a building, it empties a future. If you think Buffalo is the bottom, hold on. because the next one is older and quieter and somehow more haunting. Number 7. Ingomar, Montana. Ingomar sits on Highway 12 in Rosebud County, Montana, in a part of the state that the locals call, quote, 7. Quote, the Big Open is exactly what it sounds like. It is a stretch of land roughly the size of Belgium, where there are fewer people per square mile than there are in most parts of Mongolia. Mongolia. I am not making that comparison for effect. Look it up. The population density of eastern Rosebud County is lower than the population density of Mongolia. Ingomar had a school from 1914 to 1989, 75 years. The school closed because there were no students. The last year of operation, the school had 3 students. 2 of them were siblings. The teacher, who was also the principal and the janitor, drove 60 miles a day to teach them. When the school closed, Ingomar did not collapse the way Buffalo did, because Ingomar was already collapsed. Ingomar's peak population was in the 1920s, when the homesteading boom briefly filled this corner of Montana with optimistic farmers from the Midwest who had been told, by railroad companies, that the land would grow wheat. The land does not grow wheat. The land grows sage and rattlesnakes. Most of the homesteaders left within a generation. By 1950, Ingomar had a population of around 80 people. By 1989, when the school closed, it had a population of around 25. Today, Ingomar has a population of fewer than 10 people. There is one famous building. It is called the Jersey Lily Saloon, and it is a wooden bar from 1933 that still operates as a bar and a restaurant for ranchers and the occasional motorcycle tourist who is foolish enough to take Highway 12 instead of the interstate. The Jersey Lily is the only reason Ingomar is on any map. Without it, the place would be 3 abandoned houses, a grain elevator, and a school building with the windows broken out. Here is what makes Ingomar different from the other towns on this list. Ingomar is what those other towns will look like in 50 years. Ingomar is the future of Buffalo, of Mosca, of Tatum. Ingomar is the end state. Ingomar is what happens after the cascade is complete, and the only thing left is one bar that exists because tourists need a place to drink a beer in the middle of 200 miles of nothing. I sat in the Jersey Lily in the fall of 2022. There was an old man at the bar named Wendell. I did not get his last name. I did not ask. He told me, unprompted, that he had been a student at the Ingomar school in the 1950s. He told me that there were 42 children in the school when he started first grade. He told me that by the time he was in 8th grade, there were 19. He told me that the year after he graduated, the high school portion of the school was shut down, and after that, it was just an elementary school, and after that, it was nothing. He said, and I am writing this down, word for word, every kid I went to school with is dead or gone. The dead ones are buried in the cemetery up the hill. The gone ones, I do not know where they are. They never came back. I came back because my dad's ranch was here, and somebody had to run it. There is no ranch anymore. The ranch went under in 1994. I am still here. I do not know why. Habit, I guess. Habit. That is the word for it. There are people in these towns who are still there out of habit. The reasons they came are gone. The reasons they stayed are gone. The institutions that gave the place a shape are gone. They are still there because their feet have stopped moving, and they do not know how to start them up again. A town can run on habit for a while. A town cannot run on habit forever. Number 6. Roy, New Mexico. Roy is in Harding County, New Mexico, which is the least populous county in the state and one of the least populous in the entire United States. The county has approximately 620 residents. Spread across over 2,100 square miles, Roy is the county seat. Roy has, depending on which year's estimate you trust, somewhere between 40 and 70 permanent residents. Roy is included on this list because Roy is currently in the middle of the dying. Roy is not yet dead. Roy is, in 2024, exactly where Mosca, Colorado was in 1990. Roy, is the future tense version of every town on this list. If you want to see the cascade in motion, in real time, with the school still barely open, you go to Roy. The Roy Municipal Schools District served the town and the surrounding ranch country for over 100 years. In 2008, the district was nearly closed by the state. It was saved by an arrangement that combined Roy's remaining students with the neighboring Mosca School District. The combined district has, in recent years, had a total student enrollment in the low 50s, single digits per grade. The football team plays six-man football, like the team in Tatum, and barely fields enough players to take the field. The economic structure of Roy is the structure of a town that is one bad budget year away from being Ingomar. The school is the largest employer. The school is the polling place, the disaster shelter, the venue for the annual harvest dance, the gym where the men's basketball league plays on Tuesday nights. There is one small grocery store. There is one bar. There is one gas station. There is no doctor in the town. The nearest physician is in Tucumcari, almost an hour's drive away. There is no pharmacy in the county. The mayor of Roy, in interviews with regional newspapers, has said openly that the town's existence is tied to the school's existence. He has said that if the school goes, he gives the town 5 years before the post office is downgraded to a shared route, and another 5 before the gas station closes for lack of traffic. He has said this on the record. He has said this with a kind of calm that I think only people who already know they are dying can manage. There is a thing about Roy that I want to mention because it is small and it is also, in a way, everything. The Roy Public Library is housed in a single room of the school building. The library has approximately 1,900 books. The library is open 4 hours a day, 2 days a week, staffed by a volunteer named Eleanor, who is in her 70s. Eleanor told me, when I drove through Roy in 2023, that the library has the same number of books today as it did in 1978, because the library has not received funding for new acquisitions in over 40 years. She said, and again, I am writing this down word for word, "We do not get new books. We get the books people leave us when they die." Picture that. A library that is a death bequest archive. A library where every new title is a memorial. A library that grows only because the people of the town are passing away and donating their estates. This is not a library. This is a museum of a town that does not know yet that it is in the past tense. Roy is on the list because Roy is the warning. Roy is what the next 10 years look like if nothing changes. Roy is the school that has not closed yet, in the town that has not died yet, in a country that is not paying attention. Number 5, Edinburgh, North Dakota. Now we are moving north. Now we are getting into country where the winter does not end and the population numbers are written in pencil because they keep needing to be erased downward. Edinburgh, North Dakota is in Walsh County, in the northeastern part of the state, about 40 miles from the Canadian border. The town was founded by Norwegian immigrants in the 1880s. The Lutheran Church on Main Street still has services in Norwegian on the first Sunday of the month, although the congregation is down to about 11 people, most of them widows. The Edinburgh School closed in 2003. The closure was the result of a multi-district consolidation that the state mandated when the regional enrollment dropped below a state-imposed threshold. The closure was contested. There was a lawsuit. The lawsuit failed. The school closed on a Friday in May of 2003. There was a graduation ceremony for the last 12 students. The local paper, the Walsh County Press, called it the longest funeral the town had ever held. After the closure, the cascade in Edinburgh moved at textbook speed. Within 4 years, the population had dropped from around 250 to around 170. Within 7 years, the grocery store had closed. Within 10 years, the bank branch had been replaced by an ATM in the back of the gas station. The gas station, as of my last visit, was open 3 days a week, run by a cooperative of local farmers who keep it alive because they cannot drive to a town with a gas station every time they need diesel for their tractors. There is a man in Edinburgh named Sigurd Nelson who is in his 80s. He was the school's bus driver from 1971 until the day it closed. 32 years. He drove the same route, more or less, for over 3 decades. When the school closed, his job ended on a Friday. He was 61 years old. He did not look for another job. He told me that there was no other job to look for. He told me that he sat in his kitchen for about a year and that his wife, who has since passed away, said to him at one point, quote, "I have been thinking about that line for 2 years." He is still driving the bus. He just is not in the bus anymore. Every person in every town on this list is, in some sense, still driving the bus they used to drive. They are still going through the motions of the lives they had when the towns were alive. They wake up at the same time, they make the same coffee, they look at the same kitchen window. The view through the window has changed. The houses across the street have come down. The school is a field. The bus does not come anymore. They are still driving the bus. That is what closing a school does 20 years after you close it. It does not stop being closed. It keeps being closed every morning in the kitchen of every person who used to depend on it. Number 4, Cherry Valley, Arkansas. Cherry Valley is in Cross County in the Arkansas Delta, which is one of the most economically devastated regions in the United States. The Delta is flat, hot, and unforgiving. Cotton built it. Cotton left it. The towns that remain are some of the poorest places in the country, with median household incomes that are less than half the national average. Cherry Valley had a school district that was consolidated in 1998. The Cherry Valley schools were merged with Wynne, a larger town about 11 miles to the southeast. After consolidation, the children of Cherry Valley began riding buses to Wynne. The buses leave Cherry Valley around 6 in the morning. The buses arrive back around 4:30 in the afternoon. The morning ride is 45 minutes. The afternoon ride, because of the route the bus takes, is closer to an hour and 20 minutes. What happened to Cherry Valley after consolidation is, in some ways, more dramatic than what happened to the towns we have already covered. Because Cherry Valley was already poor. Cherry Valley did not have the cushion that Tatum had. Cherry Valley did not have the cultural infrastructure that Edinburgh had. Cherry Valley had a school, a few churches, a small main street with a handful of stores, and a population that was already Los U-Haul and a security deposit somewhere else. The families who stayed were the families who could not afford to leave, which means that Cherry Valley today is a town that is poorer than it was in 1998 by every measurable index, partly because the school closed and the people who could leave did. I drove through Cherry Valley in early 2023. I parked in front of the old school building. The building is still standing. Some of the windows are intact. There is a chain link fence around it. There are signs warning about asbestos. There is a basketball hoop in the parking lot with no net, with the rim bent at an angle. There were 2 boys, maybe 9 and 11, shooting a basketball at the rim while I was there. They were not students at this school. This school has been closed for 26 years. They were just 2 boys with a basketball in a parking lot in a town that had run out of places to be a kid. I asked them, casually, where they went to school. They said when. I asked how they got there. They said the bus. I asked when they had to wake up to catch the bus. The older one said 5:40. He was 11 years old. He was waking up at 5:40 in the morning to ride a bus to a school in another town every weekday, 9 months a year. He had been doing this since kindergarten. He will do it until he graduates, if he graduates, which the statistics say he is 23% less likely to do than a child who attends school in his hometown. That number is from the National Center for Education Statistics. Children who ride buses for more than an hour each way in rural districts have measurably lower graduation rates. The school is closer to home for a reason. When the school is far from home, the home wins less often than the road does. That is Cherry Valley. That is what consolidation looks like in a place that did not have the resources to absorb the shock. Number 3, Glasgow, Montana. Glasgow is special. Glasgow is special because Glasgow is, according to a 2018 mathematical analysis published by the Washington Post, the most isolated town in the lower 48 United States. The Post used a metric called the __quote_12__, which calculates the average distance from a given town to every major population center in the country. Glasgow scored higher than any other town in the contiguous 48 states. It is, by this measurement, the loneliest town in America. Glasgow has a population of around 3,000 people. It is in Valley County, in the far northeastern corner of Montana, about 50 miles from the Canadian border. The nearest city of any size, Billings, is over 270 miles away. Glasgow has a high school. The high school is currently open. The high school is also, according to multiple state-level reports, quote, 13, quote, in the medium term. I included Glasgow on this list, not because the school has closed, but because the school is on the bubble, and Glasgow is what we are about to lose. Glasgow is large enough, by Montana standards, to feel like a real town. There is a courthouse, a hospital, a movie theater, a couple of restaurants, a hotel that gets booked solid during pheasant hunting season. If you walked down the main street of Glasgow on a Saturday afternoon, you would not say to yourself, "This town is dying." You would say, "This is a small town that is doing okay." Glasgow is not doing okay. Glasgow is doing something more dangerous than dying. Glasgow is hollowing out from the middle while the surface still looks intact. The high school enrollment in Glasgow has dropped from over 400 students in 1990 to under 240 in 2023. The hospital has had a hard time recruiting doctors for over a decade. The current rotation depends on traveling physicians who fly in for 2-week shifts. The movie theater is operated by a non-profit because no commercial operator could make it work. The hotel survives on hunting season. If the high school closes, and there are demographic models suggesting it could, within the next 10 to 15 years, if current trends continue, Glasgow would, almost overnight, drop into the same trajectory as Buffalo and Edinburgh. The hospital would lose its biggest argument for staying open, which is that Glasgow has a school and therefore has families. The movie theater would lose its weekend business. The hotel would lose its off-season events. A town can be the loneliest town in America and still be a town, as long as the school is still ringing the bell at 8 in the morning. A town that is the loneliest town in America, without a school, is not a town anymore. It is a settlement. There is a difference. I sat in a coffee shop in Glasgow in the fall of 2022. There was a woman at the next table, a teacher in her 40s, who was talking to a friend. She was not talking to me. I was not eavesdropping on purpose, but the coffee shop was small. She said, and I am writing this down from memory because I did not have my notebook out, quote, 14. That is the quietest, most frightening thing anybody said to me, or near me, during the entire year I spent on this story. I will love this town until I have to leave it. I will love it the whole way out the door. Number 2. The Northern Plains Composite, Centerville, and the Cascade. I am pulling this entry slightly differently. There is a region in the central and northern Great Plains, covering parts of South Dakota, North Dakota, eastern Montana, and western Minnesota, where between 1990 and 2020, over 90% of small-town schools were either closed or consolidated. 90% in one generation. This is one of the largest institutional collapses in modern American history, and almost no one outside of the affected counties knows it happened. I cannot do this collapse justice with one town, so for the number 2 slot, I'm going to walk you through a composite. I'm going to use the name Centerville because there are at least 4 real Centervilles in this region, and they are all approximately the same story. Centerville had a school. The school was the center of the town, both literally and functionally. In 1990, the school had about 120 students across all grades. By 2000, it had 60. By 2010, it had 19. In the early 2010s, the state mandated consolidation. The Centerville school was closed. The students were absorbed into a regional district whose central school was 38 miles away. What happened next is the Cascade, and it happened on schedule. Year 1 after closure. The elementary teachers, who lived in town, lost their jobs and moved away. Year 2. The local insurance agent, who depended on the teachers as customers, lost 40% of his book and consolidated his office in another town. Year 3. The grocery store, which depended on the school's lunch program for a meaningful share of its weekly orders, closed. Year 4. The post office was downgraded from full service to a community mailbox. Year 5. The volunteer fire department, which had relied on volunteers who were teachers and bus drivers and the grocery store owner, dropped below the minimum number of trained members and was absorbed into a county-level regional service that takes 28 minutes to reach the town in good weather and 45 in bad. Year 5. That is the timeline. From a working town to a town that cannot put out its own fires in 5 years. There is a researcher at North Dakota State University who has tracked this cascade in dozens of communities. Her data is not surprising once you know the pattern. What is surprising is how regular the timeline is. The 5-year fire department collapse happens almost every time. The grocery store dies in year 3, almost every time. The post office downgrade is year 4, almost every time. It is not random. It is mechanical. It is the same machine running in town after town. They closed the school. They started the machine. The machine does not need any more input. It just runs until the town is gone. I want to tell you about one specific moment from the composite. There was an evening in one of the Centervilles, in the late autumn of the year after the school had closed, when the town held what was supposed to be a community supper at the Lutheran church. The supper was an annual event. It had been held every year for over 40 years. Traditionally, the school cafeteria staff helped prepare the food, and the high school choir sang at the end of the evening, and the students in the agricultural program donated the corn and the potatoes from the school garden. The first year after the school closed, the supper was held anyway. The cafeteria staff was gone. They had moved away. There was no choir. There was no school garden. The food was bought from a Cisco truck that drove in from a distributor 2 hours away. Approximately 31 people came. In previous years, attendance had been over 200. The pastor gave a short blessing. People ate quickly. People left early. By 8 in the evening, the church was empty. The pastor told a regional newspaper, in an interview I read in the archives, that the supper that year was the funeral we did not realize we were holding. The next year, the supper was canceled. It has not been held since. That is what number 2 looks like. That is what happens when 90% of the schools in a region close in one generation. You do not just lose schools. You lose the suppers. You lose the choirs. You lose the corn from the school garden that an old farmer used to sit on the church steps and shuck while he told stories to whoever would listen. You lose the conditions that made it possible to be a community. Now we get to number 1. And before I tell you about it, I have to tell you that everything we have just covered, all 9 of those towns, the partial deaths and the slow deaths and the cascades and the suppers that became funerals, all of that is the warm-up. Number 1 is different. Number 1 is what happens when the cascade runs all the way to the end. Number 1 is the only town on this list that the United States government no longer recognizes as existing. Number 1. Arena, North Dakota. Arena is in Burleigh County, North Dakota, about 40 miles north of Bismarck, in the kind of country where the sky is so big that it makes you feel, the first time you see it, that you have been living indoors your entire life without knowing it. In 1989, Arena was a town. Arena had a post office. Arena had a zip code. Arena had a town hall. Arena had a school. The school was, by that point, a small K-8 facility that served maybe 25 students from Arena and the surrounding farms. The school was the only operating institution in the town. The grocery store had closed in the 70s, the bar had closed in the early 80s, the grain elevator was still operating, but it was managed remotely by an agricultural cooperative based in Bismarck. The school closed in 1990. After the school closed, the cascade in Arena did not stop at the usual places. The cascade kept going. The post office closed in 1995. The town hall functions were transferred to the county in 1998. The grain elevator was demolished in 2000 because no one wanted to maintain it. The handful of houses in the original town grid were either bought up by neighboring farms for the land or simply abandoned. In 2002, the state of North Dakota officially disincorporated Arena. The town's legal status as an incorporated municipality was revoked. There was no longer a mayor because there was no longer a mayor's office to occupy. There was no longer a town budget because there was no longer a town to budget for. The streets were unincorporated into the surrounding township. The zip code was decommissioned. The name Arena, North Dakota was, on official state records, retired. I drove out to where Arena used to be in the summer of 2023. I want to describe what I saw because most people watching this will never see it, and because I think it matters that someone describes it. I drove north out of Bismarck on Highway 83, then turned east on a county road. The road was paved for the first 10 miles, then turned to gravel, then turned to a kind of compressed dirt that the county grades twice a year if it remembers. I drove through farmland. I passed 3 working farms. I passed a feedlot. I passed the foundation of a house that had been removed at some point, leaving only the concrete pad, with a single rusted swing set on it. I came to a place where, according to my older map, a 1987 atlas that I had bought at a used bookstore for this purpose, the town of Arena should have been. There was a road sign. The sign said Arena Township, not Arena. There was a small green and white sign, the kind the county uses for unincorporated places, that simply said Site of Arena. That sign is the closest thing the town has to a tombstone. I parked. I walked. There was the foundation of what had been the school. The school had been demolished sometime in the late 90s. Only the concrete slab and a few fragments of brick remained. The slab had grass growing through the cracks. There was the foundation of the post office, smaller, also overgrown. There was a section of cracked asphalt that had been a street. The street did not have a name on any current map. It had been Main Street once. It does not have a name now. There was nothing else. No buildings, no people. No animals, except a meadowlark that flew up from the grass when I walked too close. The wind was the only sound. I stood on the slab where the school had been. I tried to imagine the bell ringing. I tried to imagine children running out the door. I tried to imagine a teacher standing where I was standing, looking out at a classroom of 25 students in a town that had a name and a zip code and a future. I could not. The place did not let me. The place had been taken back so completely by the prairie that it did not have any room left for the imagination of the people who used to live there. Whatever Arena had been, the prairie had won. The school slab was just a piece of concrete. The road was just a piece of cracked asphalt. The town was a name on a sign that the county would probably take down the next time it rusted past usefulness. I want you to sit with this. In 1989, there was a school in Arena, North Dakota. There were children in that school. They had teachers. They had lunches. They had recess. They had Christmas pageants. They had a basketball hoop in the gymnasium. They had names. They had futures. They were planning to grow up in this town, or to leave it and come back to it for Thanksgiving, or to bury their parents in it and visit the graves on Memorial Day. In 2010, the United States Census Bureau, when conducting the decennial census, did not include Arena, North Dakota as a populated place, because there was no longer a town there to populate. The school slab is on the prairie. The post office foundation is on the prairie. The street is on the prairie. The name Arena is on a small green county sign that says, Site of Arena. Site of, past tense. A town that is now a site. The school closed in 1990. The town was disincorporated in 2002. 12 years from the closing of one building to the legal extinction of an entire municipality. 12 years for a place to go from a place to a site. 12 years for a school board's decision. A vote that took less than 4 minutes, that was justified on a spreadsheet that saved the district a few $100,000, to delete a town from the map of the United States. That is number 1. That is Arena. That is the Cascade, run all the way to the end. Now I have to bring this in for a landing, and I have to do it carefully because I do not want to lie to you. I do not have a happy ending for this episode. I do not have a redemption story. I do not have a town on this list that fought back, won, brought the school back, restored the population, and is now thriving. There are a few towns in America that have done versions of this. There are charter school revivals, there are remote work boom towns, there are immigrant resettlement programs that have brought new families into dying districts, but none of them are on the scale of what was lost. None of them undo Arena. None of them unbury the towns that are already buried. What I have is something smaller, and I think more honest. I have a sentence that an old man named Wendell said to me at the Jersey Lily Saloon in Ingomar, Montana, that I have been thinking about for over a year. He said, "They closed the building. They did not close the history." He meant something specific by it. He meant that the school in Ingomar is gone, but the people who went to that school are not gone. He meant that the building was demolishable, but the memory was not. He meant that as long as there is one person alive who remembers what the bell sounded like, the bell is still, in some small way, ringing. I think he is right, and I also think he is at the end of his rightness. Wendell is in his late 70s. The other people who remember the Ingomar bell are also old. When they are gone, the bell will be gone, and then the town will be gone, in the way that the towns we cannot name anymore are gone, completely, beyond memory, into the prairie. That is what this episode is, in the end. It is a list. It is a record. It is, maybe, a small ringing of the bell. Tatum, Mosca, Buffalo, Ingomar, Roy, Edinburgh, Cherry Valley, Glasgow, Centerville, Arena. On the map in 1989, off the map in 2010. If you watched this far, you owe me one thing. Subscribe. Not because I want the number to go up. Subscribe because the next episode in this series is about what closes after the school closes. The hospitals, the police departments, the volunteer fire crews, the post offices that downgrade to community mailboxes, the churches that hold their last service on a Sunday in January and lock the door. The cascade does not stop at the school. The school is just where it starts. I am going to walk you through what is closing right now, while we are sitting here, in towns whose names you will recognize. I am Report State. I drive through the places that are not on the maps anymore. I write down what I see. I tell you about it because somebody has to, and because the spreadsheet that closed Arena did not have a column for what it was actually deleting. There are zip codes that do not exist. There are towns that the post office no longer recognizes. There are children riding buses for 90 minutes each way to schools their grandparents would not have recognized. There are old men sitting in saloons remembering bells that nobody else can hear. They closed the building. They did not close the history, not yet. Stay for the next one. I will see you in the towns the maps forgot.